stories, but then we thought it would be really interesting for the community to know. We had recorded it, and we hope that we would be able to reach to much larger crowd now. But now, what about the citizens? How did they came to help during the COVID? What kind of innovations that has come? Uh, we started to ask these questions to ourselves as well. And then we realized that there are maker spaces, maybe not always that they were all active during the COVID because of the restrictions that was there. Some of them did some very interesting work. Otherwise, also the maker spaces are a very interesting space where citizens can come to work. So with that thought, we invited in this session 2 maker spaces. So one is called the workshop maker space. And we with us we have Craig DiMarlo. He's the co-founder of it. And Makerspace is one of Bangalore's most popular makerspace. The workshop has worked closely with leading corporates, schools, and college to craft experimental program to nurture creative communities that help solve problems, build networks, and develop skills that boost confidence and performance. The workshop has since inception in 2015 believed in the exponential power of making and doing. From makers to artists and students to hobbies, the workshop has hosted over 400 workshops with thousands of participants experiencing hands-on learning. Featured by leading nationals and digital publications, the workshop has built interactive installation at Kochi Biennale, London Festival of Architecture, Design Nuru, Makers Faire, Be Fantastic Festival, Three Rivers Festival, Bangalore Design Festival, besides working with leading institutions to design and execute experimental programs. The workshop has also collaborated with leading corporates to run customized experiences. As part of the makers community, the workshop has run pro bono and subsidized workshop with government schools and NGOs. Over the years, the workshop has collaborated with some of the best, brightest, including IIT, NID, IISc, and corporates like Samsung, Google, and Titan, to name a few, besides collaborating with mentors from across the globe to run cutting-edge experimental programs. After this makerspace, I would just like to introduce Craig as well. So he's the creative director, experimental educator, and co-founder of the workshop. Craig has also co-founded Think Happy Every Day, a creative practice that works from brand to building. A master's in journalism and mass communication, he's currently pursuing his doctorate. He has crafted creative strategies and campaigns for some of the most advanced brands in the world across offices in London, Bombay, and Bangalore over a career spanning over 19 years. Through Think Happy Everyday workshop that he has founded. So now I invite him to come here and share his experience.
Yes, yeah, okay. Hi, everybody. As I've been introduced already, I'll just do a quick run through of why we started the workshop. So way back in 2000, I think 13 or 14, 13 and 14, we were in London, and Anna was at the Institute of Making at UCL there pursuing her master's. And one day she came back from the institute and said, you know, if I had a space like this in India when I was in college, the things I would have made and done. And with that, we decided to come back. When we were coming back to India, we decided we would start a workshop. And me being a brand person, the first thing I asked her is, what do you want to call it? And she said workshop. And the space was, it was a mixture of, there was a makerspace movement going on, in India at that point of time, 2013 and 14. It was very nascent. We were doing 3D printing in London. The person who was with us, Zishan, is now doing concrete 3D printing in Eindhoven. So there was a lot of architectural research-based prerogative that we wanted to bring to Bangalore specifically, because it was the right ecosystem for us, and we were living here prior to moving there. So when we did start, it was not so much with an engineering bent or to fill in the gaps with engineering education, but more to look at the gaps of digital fabrication between university students and also people who wanted to skill up and move forward. So the workshop, when we did start, and the platform that we laid out was, it is a cross-disciplinary space, where we want people to be able to come and explore skills, while also, pursue their interest in the made world. We wanted them to be able to have a safe space where they could develop design, because not everybody can come to an IISc, and not everybody can be at an NID, and not everybody can be at all the most prestigious institutes around. So to fill that gap in, we felt there was this large gap between digital design and actual making. So there were people designing on fantastic softwares, designing especially architecturally, and this is where our genesis was. And when we did start, we met a whole community of people who were far more interested in tinkering as well, as opposed to doing structurally or material-based research, which again, we did not have the funding to do, which you need heavy amounts of funding, especially for 3D printing. So we wanted, people to have a space where they could make mistakes safely. And this was the kind of genesis. A little bit about us: 7 years since inception, thousands of workshops, 300, it's 400 now. Yeah, and we have a 3,600 square foot workflow with a mezzanine and storage space. So the workshop, essentially, when we wanted people to be able to build almost anything, the word almost here is critical to building, because we know the limitations of the tools that we can afford. And at a certain level, whenever you start, especially when you start your journey from ideation and move from ideation to prototyping, that is one phase of the journey. And post that, you move to getting it ready to market, getting it ready for manufacturing, looking for, sourcing your components, finding their cost efficiencies that you have to run. So we did not venture to that point. We kind of kept it closer to the prototyping part of it. And depending on if people have to build installations. So the space was designed and created with that purview so that we can facilitate at a certain level, even if it's a person getting started or filling in one gap of their design journey. That is where we wanted to be able to have, provide them access. Then came the pandemic, and our personal story, just at the start of the pandemic, we just had a baby. Anna, my partner and wife, is sitting right there. And we had a 5-month-old baby, and the pandemic hit the 24th March, I think it was, and we had to shut down. So it was a shock. At that point of time, we had a product design startup that was one of our members. So our workshop has a membership plan where people can come and be members and use the space. So we had a product design startup which started off with 2 people, and we had 2-3 of them working around there. And then finally they had like about 9 people, and they moved out partially in the pandemic. In the second wave is when they moved to Kenya with a larger manufacturing. And the story is not our story, it's a story of the workshop and how the workshop was self-facilitated. I mean, a few things that we felt it did a small part in the massive exercise that was going on with the number of people innovating and scrambling to get components, parts, going to whether they were going to SP Road, or whether you're trying to get things from shipped in from somewhere else or contacting somewhere else to be able to collaborate. So the product design startup. So the pandemic hit, we shut down, and then we got a call from the boys, I would say rather, the boys of the product design house, and it was Sanjay. Their company is called Bramworks, and they said, Craig, listen, there are these open source files for face shields floating around, and we're going to manufacture. We want to try and test them. So I said, okay, here are the keys. What do you all need? And you'll get started, because we were just like trying to be as far away from everything as possible, you know. So and we were not necessarily involved, but the workshop was open. Now, this team, what we did was we then set up a group. Since we also work pharmaceuticals, we do a lot of work with pharma companies for medical papers and things like that. So we had I would say, a group of doctors that we reached out to, and we created a task force between the doctors and the prototyping guys, the Bramworks, and allowed them to start off with the valves. So they were trying to work around whether, you know, if we have the open source Venturi valves that were floating around, and they tried to test that. So they were moving through that to see if it can actually work on the field. Because it's nice to say that, okay, we can print it and it's going to solve problems, but there are medical certifications. It has to be a medically robust, I would say, medical instrument. You know, it's not something that we can fool around with. So they went through a process of testing, speaking to the doctors, sending things. The Bangalore ecosystem for innovation is brilliant because we had Dunzo still running. So we had people Dunzoing things back and forth, and it was moving really fast because there was nobody on the road. So we could send things for test. So this was the basic stuff. Now, this honestly did not go too far. Okay, it was tested. We sent a few samples there. The bulk of the order for these for the startup, they worked with the laser cut face shield masks. So when we go back to the whole process of what happened, and I would say the ability of a makerspace to you can't provide for everything, you can't mass manufacture, but we could innovate and prototype and test that prototype at speed. So that was one thing, because you're also limited by the machinery that you have. Some of the tools needed to be, you know, some of the tools that need to be used when we finally decided to do the face shields, the mass manufacturing of it. It was much easier for the team to work with larger manufacturers and work it out that way, as opposed to produce in the makerspace. So ultimately, I think Bramworks shipped out about 50,000 face shields. There were about 25 of these that went out to different groups of doctors and hospitals. There were conversations that happened. There were conversations that happened over the ventilator. And that's when because I don't have engineering skills. Anna doesn't have, skills to engineer something like that. But we were wondering if we could facilitate that. And there were so many issues with the certifications and to release that machine, that the timeline that they calculated for the machine to hit the market would kind of surpass the peak. So the peak would be over and the machine would be there, but it would not serve the purpose, you know. So the decision that was taken is, of course, we could have put resources to do that, but for us, it was not our core skill set. And the community that was working with us found it much safer for them to pursue what they already had nailed and supply that, rather than continuously innovate. If we had more people, more resources, probably that could have been done. But at base, when we look at the role of what the workshop would have played in this large, I think IISc did so much. We were reading every bit of news you saw in the newspaper was hope. You know, like you're overjoyed to see that someone has done something that is going to change or better the situation. And this allowed us to understand that at a time of an emergency, when everything was shut, we did have very senior doctors come together, and we had people from telemedicine, two telemedicine groups who were talking to us. We got calls from some other people who will, in fact, I think Bramworks undertook 2 government contracts for the face shields, where they shipped like about 20,000. One of the shipments was 20,000 to one of the government organizations. So, and that needed to be produced within days. It was not something where we can call a bunch of people and sit down and work it out that way. It had to be at manufacturing scale. So what we realized is that while our space is there, it was designed to do one thing, and us trying to push it to do another thing would strain the resources of the space. So as a point in the process of the whole process of whatever we were looking to do and facilitate, the workshop was intended to be a platform with a certain amount of tools for people to test, iterate, and then move to something that is more robust. And in fact, that is when the startup moved to Pina, and they moved to a bigger space where they had the PVC, the molding and everything going on. So their space was bigger. The machinery was more suited to exactly what they were intending to do. They now do work with medical devices as well. So they've changed their trajectory a little bit. Initially, they were doing work with home appliances, and they moved to a more medical device. But we did understand that the rigor of innovation should never be taken away from what it is. It's not something that we started up, a group of people came together and we invented something. There are standards. We realized there were like number of certifications which you would take at least a month or two to navigate through, and plus you need funding to continue the work. So depending in the near future, like in fact, the model which we have seen work internationally is where corporates use maker spaces and academic colleges besides the ones that we have here. So more colleges are involved in innovation and setting up things that might be the next generation of manufacturing or even prototyping. So this was for us, I think the most that we did, and I see, there's Vaibhav over there and other maker spaces. They did a fantastic job of actually moving the community. From our side, we just had our little space open and hope that the people who were members and using the space used it to its fullest capacity during the time that it was needed to be open. And yeah, that's us. Besides that, we do a lot of other things now. We run a lot of classes for woodworking, metalworking, robotics and coding, experiential learning, design thinking, rapid prototyping, and of course corporate workshops which help people place up. But in a nutshell, we figured that the hands-on education, the ability for people to make stuff, the ability for people to break down stuff, for people to relook at something. We're not completely in support of the Jugaad ideology. We look at innovation as something that, of course, you can make do with a few resources at times. But the moment you have to take something to market, especially in the case of something as serious as a pandemic, there are lives that are dependent, there are doctors that are dependent on the instrumentation. We had one of the issues we had with the valves was that there was a pressure issue and they weren't sure if it would handle the pressure. So we tested, I think, about 6, 7 of them, and they still weren't 100% sure if it was going to work for them. So that's about what we had. If there are any questions that you'll have, we gladly take them. And yeah, thank you for having us. Yeah.
I have a quick question. I was curious, does the model, I know you don't want to go to manufacturing, and I think it's lovely that you have a workshop which focuses on the creativity part of it, right? Innovate, make a prototype. is the business model going to be such that you kind of raise money through memberships, or do you think that you would, or does it make sense for you to have more classes and use it as a kind of an education platform, but you kind of source it to places where who don't have these kinds of resources?
That's exactly our plan. So when the makerspace movement started, it was almost like the pool table syndrome. I love to give this example. So a lot of people set up, they said, oh, makerspaces are in vogue, people are going to come and make stuff. And then you realize that every engineering college had a makerspace. And if by that standard, engineering has miserably failed in India. Because we have engineers come to us and say, I used the tool 20 years ago, but I don't know much, which takes a little bit of the innovation out of, or takes the engineering out of engineering, for us, because you're working with your hands, you can't just do schematics, you have to test and you have to build out stuff. And then that's why we follow the thing of make mistakes safely, and our model is, I think, a mixed model where we wanted to fill the gap between digital fabrication and digital design. Because people are designing at pace right now. I mean, students are like, they're like, boom, okay, they go to the net, they're like, this is open source, this is ready, I can just 3D print it. And then you realize when you go to 3D print a part, you need to, shave off everything, and then you have to spend like a lot of time in the post-production of it. So what we realize is that there is no one model that works for us. We have to do a little bit of education. The space exists purely for the space to exist, for people to come and make and do what matters to them. If it would be wonderful if we had more industry come in and put out mandates. Like right now, we are working with an NGO. We've worked with a couple of NGOs. We've done installations that we're not showcased other work, but we've done installations where we talked about air pollution. In fact, we had worked with IISc long ago in 2015. There was a program called Reimagine Waste. So that was actually our stuff from our advertising thing. The name was given by us. We were approached by Waste Ventures and they said, we want to do a waste hackathon. And we do a lot of work with Google and do hackathons and stuff like that. But we said, you can't just call it waste hackathon. We call it Reimagine Waste because garbage doesn't have to be a dirty thing. And we were very happy to see that they raised funds, So we have not embarked on that journey as yet because honestly, I run advertising, Anna runs architecture, and the workshop seemingly runs itself. And we try to work at the intersection of design and technology. So somehow for us, we work a lot of education. We believe very strongly in the exponential power of you being able to do stuff. So of course we can do stuff digitally, but the moment you decide to make that, that new thing, you have to move from your system into the real world, and you probably start with skills like woodworking, metalworking, basic robotics, putting things together. We work with companies, larger companies. We did some work with Ola, right from the chassis. I mean, it starts with you being able to put things together. Whether they're doing it robotically, at that point you need a coder to work, to work the robotic arm, and you probably work with KUKA or ABB. So for us, the model is actually evolving, and we are in hope. We are in hope that some larger corporates, government bodies. In fact, Niti Aayog had spoken to us when we started. There was a lot of buzz in 2015, 16, up to 17. And then suddenly it just died down. I mean, it just died down. 3D printing had gotten completely commercialized, was mainstream now. The power of additive manufacturing was no longer a buzzword. We were doing IoT in 2015, we were doing IoT workshop. We stopped running them now because it's a course. So every time we had something, we prefer to be at the experiential, the experimental edge of it until, it gets picked up by corporate, it gets picked up by mainstream education. And then they standardize. So we do have students. The number of members, we have very few people who actually have the time to come and make something. And even during the pandemic, the number of people, I mean, just actually, we were hiding out at home. We have a baby, we're like trying to get in touch with people, release everything digitally, and the space is open. If you need anything, we'll coordinate. So I feel the first level apprehension in Indian education has been, it's not stymieing us, I wouldn't say that, but I'd say that there is a box that has been created, which people are now kind of moving out of. And with the new education policy, of course, they've put an emphasis on the ability to be able to make something. And I think we'll see in the next 10 years new patents and people coming. So we've had lots of children come to the workshop. I wouldn't call them children, I call them youth. I think one of the most touching programs that we did was, as I mentioned, we do work with NGOs and they do pay, but it's subsidized. We take whatever they have. They say they have this much, we say, okay, let's just do it. And we worked with, I forgot his name, we worked with the remand home to, help demonstrate skills to people who are juveniles. And they didn't allow us to film, we didn't want to. It was quite dangerous as they're not supposed to be handling tools. And just the ability for someone to do that was the same idea that another NGO called Timbuktu Collective, they wanted to figure out how do you empower people to stay where they are. So there's a migration brain, there's a talent brain where everybody who's capable in a village is coming to the city and probably being a dancer guy, a sweetie guy. Just being a delivery person, which does not take them anywhere. So there's no means for them to progress. So there was a program where we ran helping them build a makerspace and train their people to skill up. So that is where I would say a lot of our work is, because I feel India is just at a nascent stage of building up whatever we probably need. Because right now we're looking at a lot of products top down, I think there's a whole movement happening where people are building things from the ground up, and we've come across a few stories, and I think a lot more will come about now because the parents are pushing. Because the older generation, you have thinkers, and they will figure out. I mean, if you want to invent something, you want to make something, people who come by, they go to Pina. They figure out where to get their parts from, where to get their things milled. So they got that bit done. So in the space of members, the serious makers, they come and use our space occasionally. The other serious makers who want to get funding would probably go to IPPE, because they know there's a route for them to meet people who can give them money. Whereas our space is very clear to the genesis of why it exists. Make and do what matters, and then of course, you have to go to other places. I mean, this is only a starting point.
Right. So I have a related question, which is, as you said, one is to create a space and make it available. The other is to have people with skills who can sort of help them with, right? And you sort of already answered the third part I was going to ask, which is what is the usage rate on the occupancy rate. I come from the design school in IISc, and there are a lot of maker spaces around in institutions, but one of the problems there again is it lies there, the tools lie there. You don't have enough people to help people with. So any experiences, and does it make a case for us to sort of try and connect maker spaces and do something about it?
Absolutely. In fact, when we started, I was from Goa, and we were at the Goa Goa Engineering College. And when we started, we wanted to do robotic, work with robots. So our team was in London. We had the skill to get the code. Sadly, we couldn't afford the controller. We could afford the bot. The controller was a crore plus, so we couldn't afford the controller. So we kind of gave up on that idea earlier on, saying that we can't spend time just raising money for a controller and then look to do experimental stuff which no one's funding. I mean, we need someone to fund us, either a cement company or something like that. So from our side, we have a few mentors that can provide a certain number of skills. And we're always on the lookout to partner with organizations and to partner with institutions so that there are multiple gaps that can be filled. And what we've realized is an experience that is taken out of the institution. And there was a study done by Harvard that said, you take corporates, that's why they do all your corporate, you take them off and then 3 days and everybody comes back charged up and they're like, now we're going to make like 10% or 20% or 50% more. And change our bottom line or whatever the corporate mandate is. And answering your question, there is no shred of a doubt that is going to benefit both the institution, the students, and the larger movement. Because it is a movement, even if it doesn't seem like it, it is. We're here talking to a bunch of people. There are makers around India. I think makerspaces have been doing, the few that are left are doing a fabulous job of trying to stay alive. Because you have to stay alive. I mean, we've tried to run cement. Some of the workshops we were running initially was so advanced that we got like 10 people, and those 10 people are now all abroad. They're not in India. There's no work for them here. So even our design director who started with us when he did his PhD, and I think if you are doing anything with cement 3D, he's the guy who put the reinforcement in the cement 3D printing. So if you are doing that, it's from Eindhoven University, and they're featured all over with his team. And there's a very senior team of researchers. And when he had a word with us, we said, there's nothing that we have here to keep you back. We can't even make you an offer, because the education system here is not at that level where they are working exactly the same way. And you have a talent drain of some of the nicest people who could be back here. And I think they are the same people who helped the Indian team do the first 3D printed house. The tech came from them. So they're the ones who have shared the knowledge. He came down to India, he met us and was telling us that, why don't you all take up the 3D printing thing in India? And I said, but we need more funding for that. You know, we need someone to come and get the giant gantries. Of course, we can do it, but we need more institutional help. And keeping our roof up keeps us busy. The moment we get, you know, an opportunity to collaborate. So we've been to, we've done some work with IIT, done some little, but it's all workshop based. And everybody wants to come for one experience. They have a great time. And then the next time they feel that they need to bump up, you know, the morale of their people, they probably give us a call again. But it's not a sustained innovation. It's not sustained towards design objectives, which then can be, so this is the beautiful part. What we are doing with an NGO Jhatka, we have been, we built a hoarding, which was a pair of lungs, which turned black. It was featured all over India. It was beautiful. Post that, we've done some ER installations based on urban mobility. So we work with Dalt, we work with a few of the other, to talk about if we had to change, you know, not change, if we had to have a better Bangalore, you know, what are the things that would be, we would consider with regards to e-mobility or more sustainable mobility? I put that in quotes because lithium is in the gray area right now. So I don't know until people do salt cells of any, you know, whoever's researching that. But the movement is supported by the community. And I would say the community is not just people, it's people who are working in corporates, it's people who are working in institutions. And that is the community. It's not average people, because average people work somewhere. Average people talk to some people. And that is the hope that we have, that every conversation, every time we meet people, they see a glimmer of, hey, you know, maybe my people could come here and do something that we shouldn't wait for a pandemic to say we can work together, is all that I feel, you know, the simplicity of it all. We shouldn't wait for dire circumstances to try and overperform, because it puts a lot of strain on the resources and people are not used to working that way. So, yeah, I hope that answers.